Good afternoon, good evening, or wherever you are. Thank you for joining us, the second day of the China panels. Today we are talking about the governance and state capacity. My name is Sam Q Chen. I'm chairing the session today. Just to let you know, on the original agenda, Alberto and Marina were supposed to be here, but they unfortunately cannot make it today. So Alberto will be presenting tomorrow. Marina has sent her apologies, but she also sent her paper. I have put it on the chat, so you can find the link to her paper on the chat room later on. We are having 3 presentations today. The first one is going to be, the title is From the Asiatic Mode of Production to the New Project-Based Economics by Gabriel Quintanilha. The second paper is by Xinwen Zhang. The title is The State and Society and the Governance of China. The third paper is going to be presented by Gaofeng Meng. The title is Review the COVID-19 Response, the Issue of Strategy, Suppression or Mitigation. Okay, without further ado, I will hand it over to Gabriel. Gabriel, please unmute yourself. Yeah, we may. Yes, thank you. That's great. Okay.
Can you hear me fine?
Yes, that's fine.
I'm line up. Well, I'm here to talk about the structural transition in China from the Asiatic mode of production to new project-based economics. The Old Mode and Socioeconomic Formation, Dialectics of History. On his 18th of Brumaire, Marx, an avid reader of Shakespeare, would refer back to the Old Mode, a narrative device employed by the bard on his play Hamlet, where the ghost of the late Danish king thrown under the stage would push forward the plot of the play, leading Hamlet on his quest for revenge. Marx adopted the Old Mode as a metaphor for the forces slowly operating underground that would lead to a revolution. I will borrow Marx's metaphor of the old mole to analyze the invisible forces of history that suddenly burst from beneath the ground, leading to a radical change in the spheres of human activity. Marx periodized the eras of human development into modes of production. Eric Hobsbawm draws attention to the risks of trying to force a reality in constant transition in a fixed form in rigid categories. In this way, to avoid having a static picture of a dynamic process, we must observe the modes of production as large frame, both geographical and temporally, where constant dynamic transformations occur within it. Therefore, the analysis of specific historical processes must be studied in their particularities. Marx, when analyzing the impact of the capitalist mode of production on Russian communes, in his correspondence with Vedas Willich, compared the formation of the society to the formation of the globe, with a series of different layers from various ages, one superimposed to the other, marking the progression of epochs. Not only the Russian commune was transformed by the advance of capitalist mode of production, but we have a few historical examples of transformation of a social institution, where the resurgence of slavery during the period of mercantile expansion and its importance for the capitalist economy beats the role of the Catholic Church from the late antiquity to the Middle Ages, or the existence of trade among the spheres of human activity for a few millennia. This kind of development tends to be clouded when viewed through the broad lens of the mode of production. So the proper tool to perform this type of analysis is the category of socioeconomic formation. As Elias Jabbour here put, the concept of modes of production is the universal, and the socioeconomic formation is the particular. The intellectual elaboration of the Asiatic mode of production was a long, complex, and contradictory one. Marx and Engels rely on sources as diverse as travelers' accounts, documents from colonial authorities, and creative but no less problematic conceptualization of thinkers like Montesquieu, Adam Smith, and Hegel. The central point of this mode of production is the relation between communal village ownership of the land. Although private property may exist, it is not regulated by the institute of law, but by kinship, and community. At the superior level, there is a central political power that acts through a state bureaucracy by appropriating the surplus of the rural production and creates a political unit between the microcosm and the microcosm of the lower level. Given the vagueness of the Asiatic mode of production, there were efforts to solve and enrich it. Samir Amin sought a historical synthesis through the formulation of the tributary mode of production, which encompasses feudalism, placing the slave Asian and feudal modes of production in a long historical continuity between archaic and capitalist modes. Godelier sought to remove the geographical determination of this concept, making it relatively elastic to encompass the formation of class society. Wittfogel emphasized the common ownership of the land and the centralization of the state's bureaucracy capacities, excluding the mobilization at the community level, which was both noted by Marx and was a reality in Asian societies. All these efforts aim to associate.
Right. Okay, I think it may take some time for Gabriel to come back.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
In
I guess.
Yes.
While the China and United States discussing 5G in Rio de Janeiro, the 2G and 3G don't work here.
I know. Okay. In the meantime, maybe we need to ask the second presenter to just step in to maybe do the presentation first, and then we will go back to Gabriel.
Okay, I'll show the screen.
Yeah, do you think you can share the screen?
Yeah, I'm showing it.
To choose, okay? If no problem, then I will pass it over to Xinwen. Xinwen, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, the topic is the state, the society, and the governance of China. And there is a common narrative, is a dichotomy of authoritarianism and democracy, which suggests that authoritarianism, is the opposite of democracy. And the political regime determinism based on this dichotomy suggests that since the protection of human rights is contingent on the voting system, so that a government that is chosen not through the electoral system tolerates no civic participation and might violate human rights. The reasoning behind this is the electoral system makes the government accountable, and an accountable government, which is also a democratic government, protects human rights. And conversely, lack of the voting system results in no constraint on the power of the state, which is usual authoritarian, which will violate human rights. This reasoning confuses political rights with human rights and implies that the voting system is the only possible method to make a government responsive and accountable. Marshall suggests that there are three components of civil rights or citizenship that are civil rights, political rights, and social rights. And Baltimore developed a more broader approach, which is human rights. He emphasized that the rights of ethnic minorities and the women are also important. And both Marshall and Baltimore have attributed importance to socialist reconstruction of the economy, which would reduce the concentration of wealth and economic power in the hands of a particular class. Does the political regime determinism hold? On the one hand, Rights are defined as the legal capacity to strive for things one would like to possess, but do not guarantee the possession of any of them. But on the other hand, some rights will be substantive only with the possession of things essential to human beings. For example, the access to education and welfare. And the deficiency of these social rights will impair people's capability of political participation, which will erode democracy. For example, without education, the right to freedom of speech has little real substance. If you have nothing to say that is worth saying, and no means of making yourself heard if you say it. Moreover, for people in developing countries, striving for essential things would be more effective when it is a collective action. Development countries that take initiative to promote growth and improve people's living standards are also improving people's social rights, regardless of the political regime. As to the role of the state, besides the public work assigned to the state, such as providing public goods, regulating externalities, engaging in redistribution, the role of the state to restrain the elite, that is the duty of protecting every member of the society from the injustice or oppression of every other member of it, or the duty of establishing administration or justice has often been underrated. And the role of a developmental state also includes promoting economic growth. So this slide is the distribution of holding power. Holding power is a concept I borrow from, I quote from Mustafa Khan. As a democracy should theoretically mitigate the problem or elite capture through spreading power among a series of competing government branches, or allowing for competition among intergroups. Too often, insiders can use their superior access to information and resources to manipulate the role in their favor. And the market mechanism creates winners and losers and amplify this gap between them. So the democratic system can prevent one dominant faction from tyrannizing the country, but this system may not stop the society from dividing into two classes, and the elite group are together as a class manipulating the state power. In contrast, traditional socialist countries aimed at protecting public interest by creating a classless society and transcending all the intergroups, but find that the state holds absolute power. So the question is, can the market economy create a civil society and diverse economic groups that restrain the state power? Perhaps an investigation into reality may be is needed to supplement the theoretical reasoning. Well, the governance of China ideology and the priority. After the Cultural Revolution, the CCP has abandoned the traditional socialist aims, such as the expansion of the public ownership and the creation of a classless society. Since Deng Xiaoping claimed that the goal of socialism is to pursue a common prosperity. And in the reform era, CCP believed that the appeal of socialism lies in improving people's living standard and protecting people's rights to enterprise and prosper. So there is a high level of consensus over national development goals, such as the commitment to eradicate extreme poverty by 2020, and the new rural cooperative medical scheme, and the new rural pension scheme that have covered most of the rural population. And the accountability and the responsibility the state shows in the COVID response. Next, the political regime. This part is only a literature review, and I have not sufficiently developed this part. Most scholars agree that it is an authoritarian regime with a hierarchical bureaucracy. And Chen Gangxu, with the concept of originally decentralized authoritarianism, which means that regional governance in China is highly decentralized in terms of administrative implementation and economic resource allocation, but highly centralized in terms of political control and personal control. Dangzhou depicted the formal politics in China as a hierarchical pyramid, while informal politics as a spider web with the core at the center. Xu Guangzhou claimed that the current Chinese bureaucracy is also based on charismatic authority, which impairs the impartiality of the Chinese bureaucracy. Since he suggests that the socialist ideology has charisma, he does not suggest that there is a person who has charismatic authority, but the CCP as a whole possesses charismatic authority. This is the state-society relationship. For Dangzhou, the regime type and the state-society relationship are two separate dimensions of a political system. So an authoritarian state can have limited control over the society. So with the concept of modern totalistic party state, which means that the totalistic state can intervene in the society, but it choose not to. Totalism has a neutral meaning, and it need to be distinguished from totalitarianism, which is strongly negative. In the reform era, the Chinese state has retreated from many areas. For example, grassroots governance. The 1982 Constitution stipulates that the residence committee in cities and the villages committee in rural areas are grassroots autonomous organizations. And there is also a growing civil society, such as NGOs, social media, public intellectuals, and property owner association in almost every community. And also the state deals with the society in a softer way. It allows multiple social forces to compete. For example, in the transition period, some people wanted to stay in the planned economy, but some wanted to transition to a market-oriented economy. So the state encouraged the people to enterprise by the demonstration effects of letting some people get rich first. In this process, social changes happen in a way that people feel that they are pushed forward by social trends rather than being forced by the state. So the conclusion is that the political regime determinism based on the dichotomy of authoritarianism and democracy is erroneous and may lead to dangerous results. It hypothesizes confrontation between two political regimes and overlooks social improvement in China and the commonalities shared by the two systems. So that's all. Thank you. I'll stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Xinwen. Thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting. I think a lot of people would like to ask more questions about the governance in China. It's really good to have you on the panel. Okay, let's try to go back to Gabriel. I think Gabriel is back now.
Yeah, I had a problem here. My internet went down, and in the middle of the presentation, and I didn't even notice because I wasn't seeing the shared screen with you.
Yeah,
and,
okay.
It took a time.
Right, you can go back to where you were if you want to.
Okay, I'm.
It's fine.
Yes, it's fine. Quintanilha such remove the geographical determination of the concept, making it relatively elastic to encompass the formation of class society. Wittfogel emphasizes the common ownership of land and the centralization of state bureaucracy capacities, excluding mobilization at the community level, which was both noted by Marx and was a reality in Asian societies. All these efforts aimed to associate this concept of despotism with the emerging socialist states. Even though there were some notable insights on his work, mainly the attention to the relationship between civilization and physical geography, his historical concept of hydraulic despotism is tangential to the concept of totalitarianism. Ironically, Wittfogel did not pay attention to the organic links and massive movement of popular To the massive...
Yeah, continue, please.
Okay, stuff went down again, but it's all fine. To the massive movements of popular mobilization that also existed in socialist formations, be it the Stakhanovich movement in the USSR, the Great Leap Forward, and the Cultural Revolution in China, in addition to the popular guerrilla movement that occurred so in China during World War II. As Chalmers Johnson noted in his work Peasant Nationalism and Communist Power, there is a close relation between guerrilla movement, the village ties, and the rise of the Communist Party to power. Appropriating this duality between centralized state bureaucracy and the agricultural society at the core of the Asian mode of production, when we analyze the concrete development of socioeconomic formations of East and Southeast Asia, we can find some resonance with reality, whether historically in the concept of mandate of heaven in China and his analog Xinwen in Vietnam, also the Tongwu dynasty, which now is in Myanmar, the Angkor Empire. These formations even seem to have a similar rhythm of centralization of political power and decentralization, as noted by Victor Lieberman in his work Stranger Parallels. But most importantly, even after the brutal European invasion and the consolidation process of capitalism as the dominant mode of production, which meant a brutal traumatic rupture in Asia, these formations have preserved some of their characteristics and seem to be a fertile ground for institutional innovations. China case is no different. The Chinese civilization, which is 5,000 years old, was born from the growing sedentarization accelerated after 8000 BC of the population on the banks of the Yellow and Yangtze River. The difficulties of rice harvesting have created a complex relationship between collective responsibility on the village level, and family responsibility. Rural serfdom was inexistent in China. With the decline of Western Chu, the period of spring and autumn period and the warring states period were time of radical changes, where the aristocratic order was replaced by a bureaucratic state that emerged. At the center of the state were a powerful monarch and a bureaucracy operated by officials who have been selected more based on merits or mercantile experiences than on aristocratic descent. During this period, domestic property relations in the countryside were also enforced. The state assumed a directing role through the creation of granaries, imposing monopolies of some inputs such as salt and mining, and participating in a more equal distribution of land. In addition, the state also stimulated private economic activity. Thus, a dialectical relationship developed between the two poles, which complemented but also repelled each other. When the state bureaucracy was strangling the peasants, it ended up being overthrown, losing the mandate of heaven. The relationship was only broken in the 19th century when England, during the Opium War, kicked off a series of pillages carried out by foreign countries, culminating with the end of the empire and the military invasion by Imperial Japan. The Socialist Revolution in China ended this century of humiliation. After the revolution, there is a transition to a model inspired by Soviet centralized planning. There is a strong focus on heavy industrialization, building of the infrastructure, the establishment of economic planning through 5-year plans, the abolition of private property, and the institution of the communes. The reform and opening up were instituted to solve a series of political problems and economic problems facing China. One of them is the low productivity of the communes. Since the economic specialization and division of labor took place in a very rudimentary way, through individual responsibility contract system, the household became again the center of the agriculture. So at the agricultural level, the Chinese socioeconomic formation met again with millenary institutions, the household agriculture, and the combination of it with collective institutional forms at the manufacturing level gave rise to township village enterprise. This combination quickly became one of the stepping stones of Chinese economy. Describing the process of agricultural transition, Kautsky identified two peculiarities on the rural economy: the existence of a common land ancillary to the household property, the existence of a domestic industry. With the penetration of capitalist relations in the agriculture, these two particularities tend to be dissolved, making room for what Lenin called the proletarialization of the peasants and the rise of capitalist agriculture, or in the words of Philip Huang, managerial agriculture. The Brazilian economist Ignacio Rangel, in his study of the economic development of Brazil, drew attention to how subsistence agriculture property gives rise to a complex economic relationship where peasants not only consume what they produce in the countryside, but are responsible for a range of economic activities, which, as the rural microcosm open up, are replaced by external activities and freeing up labor for the sectors of the economy. In this case, the labor freed from the countryside occupied the township village enterprise. Later, this labor ended up migrating to cities, forming the basis of a new urban proletariat. We can talk of this process as a form of primitive accumulation of socialism, as Alberto would not agree with me, but I do think that is a much more beneficial way than we have seen to these days. On another level, the state has been reconciled with the millenarian institutions of market. We can trace a parallel to the age of the Guozi debates during the early imperial China, where the concepts of heavy and light were at the center of the debate, and the imperial bureaucracy was in charge of the administration of essential strategic sectors for the reproduction of social life, the heavy part. And through the presence of merchants, it allowed the flourishing of a market to meet other needs, the light ones. The Chinese socio-economic formation, now not led by a despotic monarchy, but by a revolutionary party that fought a protracted war for the China sovereignty and independence, realizing a socialist revolution that put an end to the century of foreign domination, formed a naval bureaucracy that intervenes in the economy through means of a conglomerate of state-owned enterprises and led by the Sasaki. This allows the social reproduction in strategic sectors, the heavy, while allowing through a dynamic and robust capitalist sector to meet the other needs, light. However, without an eternal return to the old, this occurs in a much more complex socio-economic formation where technological development and its spread through the sectors of the economy allow a greater degree of social division of labor and technical specialization, thus generate an unprecedented institutional arrangement in which the difference between private and public sector become blurred. All this stems from historical development where the concept of private property is radically different from the current ones in the West. It must be remembered that historical and geographical particularities of China led to a unique development of the transition from an agricultural economy centered on close rural complexes to the communist system to a nationally integrated economy with the regional specialization where the countryside moves from communes to the restoration of the household agriculture for the individual responsibility system, and later with the opening up of this agricultural complex, it creates a non-capitalist mercantile economy, which becomes one of the catalysts for China's economic development. This process requires a complex coordination so that the bottlenecks in the economy can be overcome. Thus, once again, the need for central planning so that Chinese economy can not only resume its economic growth, but meet collective social needs, the reproduction of social life, and the reproduction social of life. This level of institutional restructuring that we are currently witnessing in China between the role of the public sector and the private one, the duality of the Asiatic mode of production seems to re-emerge on a higher level of socialist market economy, which with greater power to intervene on reality and realize projects. This socioeconomic formation that we call the new project-based economics So the old model has completed its work.
Thank you, Gabriel. That is an excellent presentation. Despite the IT problems, I think we have a good understanding, and it is a holistic view of the history of China and linking the Asiatic mode of production to the
Thank
new
you.
theory. It's really good. Thank you. So, yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, my title is a Review of Responses to the COVID-19 Suppression or Mitigation. Should I down the next? Yeah, so today I try to talk about 5 points. 1 point is one disease, that's the COVID-19, and 2 directions, that's the mitigation or suppression. 3 values, that's the life, economy, or freedom. And then I want to talk about 4 countries. That's my case study: China, the USA, the UK, and Sweden. Then I want to offer 5 my personal observations. One is that the relationship between medical experts and policy makers. The second one is which do you value, life, economy, or any other things? And the third one is about the relationship between individual and the collective. The fourth is talk about the time issue. Is there any short-term pain and long-term pain? That's I think the next one is what I talk about a learning issue. Is there any collective learning? Can there any successful collective action? So it's difficult choices, and if you choose correct, then you might go be successful. If you choose the wrong, maybe you will go to frustration. I don't think there's some easy way, or so yeah. The next one is I want to say you have to, if you want to choose everything, balance, maybe you lost almost everything. So it's an issue of like life primacy, or do you priority economy, or you cherish or value individual freedom over the public health and life, and also other. Of course, we can add other like human rights, rule of law, democracy, whatever. So my first cases is China. And I think the first we should look about Chinese medical experts. This is Dr. Zhong San. On 20th January 2020, he publicly announces the fact of human transaction in the outbreak of COVID-19, and also there are some medical experts has been affected. The signal and also the information is seriously. So there's faced some very difficult choices. And after he communicate with President Xi Jinping, he got his idea, of course, and as a doctor. So basically, the idea in the central government is life supremacy. That means they choose life over and any other things. So that's, I think, that's the political issue. And then that will be easy for him to choose, because based on his experience in SOAS, he chose the suppression rather than mitigation. He thinks general mitigation may have lost the control, and also I think he think that's too risk for mitigation at that time, because that's very serious at that time. So that's the take action. The actions are, it's very well known. I think I would say, one is that the Wuhan lockdown, that's very famous. It shocked the world, and 11 million people was, stay at home, and that we criticize house arrest. So I think the second action is do that separate the patient from health people, but they are short of a hospital. So there are 16 Fangcang shared hospital were established. And also they do that say community level control with 4 early diagnose, protection, and I think so those 4 very, very important at the community level. This is basically the Chinese case. Chinese case is regarded as one extreme of suppression. Next one, and we can say this is the Tony Fauci, the USA medical experts. But in the USA, and the first they do the mitigation, and then they do the suppression. I think that's the case. It is well known. I will omit it here. And the next one is Swedish experts. This is medical experts. That's Prime Minister. Interesting. I think Sweden can be put on another extreme. That means they take the mitigation. I think the most important point is herd immunity. But we know herd immunity at that time is without vaccine, without effective medicine. So I think herd immunity without vaccine can be seen the one extremely symbol of mitigation, similar to Wuhan lockdown, and symbol that's the suppression. And the UK case is very interesting. And we know, and at the first, they want to go to the mitigation. This is interesting because this is absolutely one turning point. That's the Imperial report. But after that report, it decides that the cost is too high. So they shift from the mitigation to suppression. I want to reflect several things. One thing, what's the relationship between medical experts and also policymakers? I think in China, basically we can say they trust each other. They supported each other. But in the USA, we can say they are sometimes very, very serious conflict between Fauci and Trump. We know Fauci even have received death threats for his, families. And in Sweden, that's the interesting point is that the Prime Minister says, it's your duty, my hands is clean. So basically not intervene of, medical experts. I think in the USA, in the UK, basically it's medical experts justify the UK government policy. So that's basically, we can say that's the relationship. Yeah. And the priority we can say in China, basically life put on the first. And in the UK, free trade economy, those things at first, and it's put the first. So that's why the reason there's 2 months delay. But later they also changed to that the kind of a balance. But herd immunity is eternal and recurrent themes in the UK and also in the USA. Yeah, and in Sweden, they take a very balanced. Say we want life, we also want a normal life, we also want economy, we also want other human rights and individual freedom. So I think that's one issue. Which do you value? Which you have to make it as a priority. I think a second issue, the third I want to talk about is a part and the whole issue. We know in China, especially Wuhan lockdown, we can see the solidarity from all over the world, because at the first stage, Wuhan has received more than 80 countries' help from masks, from other PPE, whatever. So Wuhan is not, it's a international collaboration. And later, there's more than 19 provinces and come to Wuhan and also other cities to help. So that's the solidarity of all of the China. So I think that's one issue. And do you think the part and the whole, that is the relationship, is true? Or just say that's just the individual, just maybe family, but no society? I think that's one very important issue, because we can say during this pandemic, this is a eternal conflict themes. The next one is time issue. Time issue means, and do you want short-term pains, very, very painful, or you do want long-term pains? I think in China, they choose the short-term. And the Wuhan lockdown is 76 days. That's really harsh. But after that, less than 3 months, then they have obtained their freedom. I think that's issue. But in the UK, we can say repeated lockdown. I think more than 3 months, more than that. And in China, there's no national lockdown. Remember that one point. No real national lockdown. They do some of the local lockdown and big, testing. I think that's the one issue. Then that's one issue, the social dilemma issue. Means do we and can take the short-term sacrifice, but for long-term joint efforts. I think the next one is learning. Learning, let me take an example. It's the mask issue. At the first, and no people want mask in the West, but gradually they pick up that, even take it as a compulsory in the contained rooms like a supermarket, like hospital, like others. So even it's slow, but it's also a good learning. That's a good collective learning. So learning from each other is a very good way, and also learning from history, successful and failed. I think that's what I want to talk today. Thank you very much. Any questions and comments are welcomed. Let me say.
Thank you very much, Gaofeng. Thank you for the
Thanks.
presentation. It's very good as it clarified some misconceptions people may have on China. For example, they thought national lockdown was the way to deal with it in China, but you clearly said that it is not. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
So you can end sharing.
Stop share. Yeah,
Yes.
stop share. Yeah, thank you. Thanks
Okay.
very much.
Cool. So we finished the presentation now. It is Q&A session. So we have 45 minutes for question and answer. So if anyone wanted to ask questions, you can raise your hand now using the raise hand button. Or you can also choose to type in the chat. I can read out the question for you. Okay. So if not, yeah, I may have just to do the first one. I had a question for Xinwen, one comment actually, and then one question. Xinwen, you did mention about Chinese state is actually the state may not be as prominent as people used to think, and you did say that the local governments may have more authority to make a lot of decisions now, and you used the term decentralization. I hope I got it right. Please correct me if not. I don't know if that is the right term to describe the governance in Chinese state, decentralization, because if we talk about decentralization, we may think about the United States, for example, like how the way they deal with COVID, you can see that they have different rules in different states in the United States. And the federal government was like just begging different states to abide by the central rule, but they actually have no authority to impose it. And compared it with China, it looks very different. China, the central government can tell what's the standards we are using and how the COVID measures should be implemented across different provinces. So I don't know if you wanted to comment on that. The other part I wanted to mention is the dynamics of change in the governance, because the role of the state, sometimes it looks like it is rolling back, but also at times it can be more prominent. For example, now what's happening in the market and how they control the capital, it is quite obvious that the state does have control, and the role of the state is very strong. So it doesn't seem that it is just one way direction. It actually is a dynamic process. I just wonder if you want to comment on what are the driving forces behind all these changes. For example, when they decided to stay back, when they decided that the state need to be prominent, we need to take control. So that is the question for Xinwen. Yes, I will just leave other questions to other people now. Anyone wanted to raise your hand? Please go ahead.
I think Otto has raised his hand.
Right, okay, I'm so sorry, Otto, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Otto, please go ahead.
You know, again, the button to raise my hand simply doesn't work. It's not there. So I thought, yeah, maybe Zoom has muted me. Thank you for these presentations. So yeah, I've got loads of questions, literally. So 2 questions to Xinwen. So you mentioned the theoretical approach and then the reality check. I was wondering whether maybe there is a third approach which could be useful to this topic, you know, which is not so much focused on China, but rather on the Western media and actually Western experts. It's a more text linguistic approach where we can try to see to what extent Western discourse about human rights, political rights, social rights, etc., might actually be in contradiction with the UN human rights texts. I did that once, and I even presented it in Beijing, and it was considered quite interesting. It's actually to show through text linguistic approach that the Western experts and media are actually like putting a hierarchy into human rights, where they put the political rights on the top. And then they consider that everything would come automatically from the realization of political rights, which actually might not be true. And so this text linguistic approach, I think, could be a possible contribution. My second question is, you talked about the structure of the state and the forces outside of the state, like civil society. And I was wondering whether maybe in addition to the structure of the state, there is, this very specific Chinese institution or mechanism of setting objectives, which means that it's not the structures which entirely determine the action of bureaucracy, but actually simply objectives, and then they have to do whatever they can to reach them. This is a fundamental issue, and I think it's maybe poorly understood in Western countries. Then my question to Gabriel would be, you mentioned briefly Mao Zedong, and you emphasized the central planning. And I was wondering, what's your opinion about another mechanism, which is the social mobilization, which was an important mechanism, not only during Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution, but more generally, to build up infrastructure, to push education, even if they could not pay for teachers, things like this. And then for Gaofeng, I have, a few questions and observations. I mean, I was in the COVID task force of the German Interior Ministry at the beginning of the pandemic. And there is a point I would like to make about the relationship between medical experts and policymakers. Actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, virtually all medical experts, academic experts, were in favor of going for mitigation. Really, it was no choice. They actually told everybody, and virtually all experts agreed on this. They said in 2020, anyway, whatever we do, between 40 and 70% of the population will be infected, and then we will have herd immunity. This is true for American, British, Swedish, German, Swiss, Italian experts, virtually everybody. And really the question was only, how much do we slow it down? Or, I mean, most said we must slow it down a little, but they were really going for this herd immunity. And we were very few, mostly with with contacts in China, who said, this is madness. And that's what got me into this task force, because we were the only ones saying this. And actually my university tried to silence me. They did not want this discourse, really. It was collective madness within the whole academic community. Anyway, herd immunity through infection is the only way. So I would like to have your opinion on this. And also regarding priority, actually in this task force, what really shocked me is there are measures which can be taken, which are not a kind of balance or trade-off between life and economy, but which can actually save both. And actually it's the academic community which refused to do the necessary research on this. I mean, for example, you mentioned face masks. It's actually not the countries which went through a learning process. It's really the experts who did not do any research about use of face masks in a pandemic. I mean, I've got a box of face masks, which I bought in 2003 before I went to China during the SARS epidemic. And it's written on there, use in case of a pandemic. And when COVID arrived, all the experts have totally forgotten that face masks are useful for a pandemic. And they said, no, don't use them. It's really a puzzle for me. So that would also be a question. And then regarding the time, actually the Western country thought China was going for the long pain. Western countries would go in for the short pain of getting everybody infected, and China would struggle for years and years and years. I mean, we were wrong, but so really there is this switch of, it's not Western countries which thought, we don't want the short pain, we prefer a long one. It's really, again, the academic experts who were totally wrong. So yeah, I've talked much too long. So
No, thanks.
No, Otto, I think it's very important contribution from yourself on these important subjects. I can see that 2 more hands being raised. Because we have plenty of time here, and I don't want the speakers to be too busy with a lot of questions. So I think I will just get Xinwen and Gaofeng and Gabriel to answer the first round of questions, and I will come to you, Samuel and Elias, in the second round. Okay, Xinwen, do you want to go first?
Okay, thank you for the question. Decentralization in China. In my presentation, I cited Xu Chengang's work, and he and several other scholars has used the concept of regional competition is one of the driver for China's rapid growth in the reform era. For them, in the early periods of the reform era, that the regional government still have much of the fiscal revenue in their hands. They don't need to hand most of the revenue to the central government, so they have much resources to use to promote the economic growth. But after that, the 1994 fiscal reform, that this situation has changed. The only fiscal resources that local government can use is the revenue that they sell the land. But due to the urbanization, they also have a lot of money to use. So I think in terms of the resources that they can use, I think still decentralization maybe a fine word to describe this situation. And I think it does not look like the American style, that the federal government still it is a top-down hierarchy of the bureaucracy. But I have not compared the two of them, so I just use this term. To the second question, the dynamic change of the state, especially how the state deal with the private capital. I think if we remember, the motivation of the state is to stay. The state want to stay in power. They don't want to be challenged by the top rich people, such as Jack Ma, and they don't want to disrupt the economy. They don't want to destroy the civil society. So I think then we can understand their assault to the top rich and some a certain industry, but they will not destroy all the private capital. To other, the second question. The third question from Otto. I think the third approach that the Western media, the discursive rights. I agree that perhaps in the understanding of rights, we have different understandings. In the Western culture, that political rights are on the top, but in Eastern culture, I think perhaps people who have tasted the bitterness of poverty, they don't want to return to that state. So I think the priority is growth, to improve the living standard. And I think the daily problem that they need to face with maybe solved in the village, in the community, in the county. They most people, they will not protest at the municipal government. So I think for most Chinese people, the current state of the political system may satisfy most of their needs, but I'm not sure in the future when when the living is no longer a problem. I mean, when most people live wealthy life, maybe they will have other consideration, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure I have answered your question. Thank you.
No worries, Xinwen, thank you. Gabriel, do you want to respond to Otto's question?
Yes, I will. Otto, I'm gonna be honest with you, but I do think that the market expansion was too excessive and went too far away. And as a Marxist, I would say that the commodifying of public goods like health and education went too far. And this is a problem recognized even by the Communist Party. You have during the Hu Jintao mandate, it was a main concern. There was the reform of the not only health and public and education, but the pension system. It was very harsh and unnecessary. Vietnam, I do think they went through the same path, but there was a local level and the uh, net of welfare that was not only related to the township village enterprise, but the state-owned enterprise. The market forces went to solve this kind of relations. But I do think that in the long run, this is being addressed, and you can see the grassroots level of society emerging again. You have severe voluntaries that went through great pains to help in the combat of the COVID, and you have now grassroots democracies. You see at the neighborhood level, you see there's a rise again of the workers' association. I do think that is a complex problem that happens when you have market forces. They not necessarily had to happen, but they did happen, and I do think that they are being addressed. They don't know in the long run, the long duration. That's what I do study. If these new tendencies are going to be the main ones, or they are going to underground again. But I do think that it's a good question, and I do think that there are several contradictions that only time will show how they play out.
Thank you, Gabriel. Okay, Gaofeng, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Otto. I really like your question and also your question to another speakers. I think really, really important. And for my own 3 questions, I want to try to answer one by one. One thing is learning, mask issue. I think in the West, there was institution forgetting because lockdown has happened in Italy, in England, in any other countries several centuries ago. You know, that's very famous. So that's institution forgetting. Mask is not created, invented in China. It's invented in the West. We owe you a thanks for almost several centuries. We're learning from you science and technology. So I think one thing I must emphasize, Chinese people are very grateful from learning the Western medicines, those things. And you can say Dr. Zhong Nanshan has been trained in the UK and has been, and developed his very independent research ability. He's absolutely is a great scholar, articles published in Lancet, whatever. So we are grateful that he had learned in the UK in the 1980s when Deng Xiaoping opened China to the West. So the best way learning from West health system is sent their students to the USA, to UK, to Italy, to other, So yeah, that's basically learning issue is this. We learning from you. We owe you. When we do much better, could you learn from us? Could we learn from each other? I think that's my question. But sometimes learning fast, sometimes learning slow. But anyway, even Trump is reluctantly wear his face masks. Even he joked with Biden. But we still can say that's the learning. So that's my question about the learning issue. I think we should remember anytime we should learn from our failure and also our success and from also others. So I think absolutely learning is for survive, not just for, on the bookshelf. Oh yeah, I'm a, scholar at the University of Cambridge. Look, I'm knowledgeable. No, that's not no. Learning is for surviving, for success, for economic growth, for the improvement of human rights. So I think that's my, answer your last question. Yeah, thanks. The second is about time issue. I think you are true. When the Chinese has lifted its lockdown, the Western scholars are skeptical. They say, okay, you had been suppressed the virus. You have no effective medicine. You have no vaccine. Once you lift it up, you can say your economy and others will endure hardship than any other countries. But we know the only economic growth in the world, big country, that's China and USA, UK. And, compared with other countries, that's the worst in the world, the worst in Europe. And if you compared with Sweden, with Finland, with Norway, that's terrible. Not alone Denmark and also other countries. So you want economic growth, but you can't. You want people, individual freedom to be, to be protected, but you can't. So that's also another my question. You must choose priority. So any discussion of suppression or mitigation is not redundant. Absolutely, we need that because herd immunity for 3 reasons. One is too costly. If you do that for, natural herd immunity, that needs 2 or 3 years, maybe more years. How many people will die if just 2% people or even 1% people? How many people will die? Fortunately, we have the knowledge. We don't take that away, so that's unrealistic. Another, there's no scientific evidence to say if you had been hurt by the COVID-19 once, all your whole life, you get protected from the, that's not scientific. And the third way, we have no dignity to die. That means when we die, our relatives even can't see us. So all of us, we are fortunate. We need to work. So I think we need to discuss why herd immunity. In the UK, 100th century, they had used boys, boys' school to do that experiment. And also in Sweden, they used the schoolboys to do that. And so many articles published in Lancet or whatever say there's no any hurt for students. But we have to say, yes, there's some hurt for students, even young kids. So in that sense, I think we need, as a social scientists, we need to seriously discuss that because clinician, virologist, epidemiologist all play very important role. We are grateful for their contribution. But for social scientists, if we don't do that, we are like misinformation spread everywhere. So I think you know, and you mentioned that some authority try to suppress this debate, but I think maybe we should try to learn by collective or by our individual. I think it's time to discuss the COVID-19 or next you know, pandemic similar to COVID-19. Should we do suppression or mitigation? I won't tell you. And you know how many people has died even after we have the vaccine. Look, the UK and the USA, because I had very, you know, and sincerely imagine that once we have the vaccine, all pain will be gone. But look, if you check the UK, USA data, and also Sweden data with other countries, you can see that's absolutely needs to be rethought. That's, I think, important issue. Another thing I wanted to say, and the UK compared with which country should be proper? France, Germany, or South Korea? I think that's proper because their economic well-being or, you know, on development stage are similar. How about the USA? The USA compared what? Brazil and India. You are joking. You are number one. And you know, according to John Hopkins reports, USA is the first one. UK is the second one. But they compared with those countries. China was ranked 54, if my memory is correct, you know, according to that. So in the past 2 centuries, because Western in political, military, and economic are very powerful, so they have one instinct, you know, consensus. So everything will do much better in every aspect. That's prejudice. That's open question. We have seen from this COVID-19. So I think that's also another issue. See, we should try to learn from others rather than just the pride and the prejudice. So that's all my question. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Gaofeng. Thank you for your passionate response. Yes, it is really that we hope we can learn from each other. But I think it's also showing something even more deeper now after living through this pandemic for over a year. Like you and Otto said, evidence is strong there that is no such thing as herd immunity. Like you said, people who have been vaccinated could still be severely affected, and even some of them die from it. Why there is still such an attitude, there is something deeper than scientific learning. I feel that there is a culture of predestiny that I feel quite strongly, because in China it shows that it is a preventable thing, even though when they didn't even have the vaccine, they still did everything they could to suppress it. Do not think that they can so-called live with the virus. So why there was such an example being shown, people still take it as an inevitable disease that you just need to live with it. That requires a lot more investigating and trying to understand where did this kind of thinking come from, and where does this consensus being manufactured or generated. So thank you. You opened up a very, very good question. I will give it to Samuel and then to Elias.
Yes, thank you, Samki. I just asked you to speak first because your point, the point that you're trying to make right there, it goes very along with my question to Professor Meng here. Because, well, what I've been considering is that there is a stark difference, not only between what the, well, Eastern countries of the world have used as a response to this COVID crisis, but also if we take a deeper look at how the so-called West reacted to previous epidemics, we can see also a stark differentiation. You know, not only it's not that's much far from us, you know. Back in the 1980s, we reacted to smallpox, you know, variola for Elias and Gabriel. We reacted quite differently. We actually, together with the Soviet Union, the world managed to eradicate it. But something has changed now, you know. There's perhaps a deterioration of the value of a life. I'm not talking about value as in capital, but a value as a, you know, a holistic view. It's been abandoned and it's been replaced as this some sort of notion that Semki highlighted here. This notion of predestination that is well, if you get it, you get it, and if it's your turn to die, then you shall die, you know. And this is pretty much guaranteeing to people's heads, not only in the United States but also much to my own surprise in Sweden, of all places, you know. Well, but I always thought that there would be a population in the United States that would resist and would not want to take the vaccine. Everyone always predicted that. But to see even the core capitalist countries of Europe, the so-called welfare states of Europe, you know, the Scandinavians having this, shows to me that there's a stark difference happening here. And I also would like to highlight that because certain countries in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, you know, Bulgaria, Serbia, and all of that, they actually reacted differently from Western Europe as well. You know, of course, they picked up a lot of cooperation from China, but they were receptive to such cooperation. And with that, they managed to vaccinate a lot better, a lot faster. And so there's also the other question about vaccination, because there was never considered that we could vaccinate this fast. Well, why couldn't you consider this? You should have calculations about this. It could be projected that if every single country in the world is trying to manufacture such vaccines, then we shall achieve the moment in which we have vaccines faster. So this should be considered as a precondition for the choice between the two choices the Professor Meng showed us. You know, we shouldn't. It was never about letting people go out and all of that. There is something deeper, and it seems to me that it's happening in the Western sphere as a whole. So it's more linked to ideology than actual developments in political economy and all of that. It goes a bit deeper, I guess. I don't know. So that's my question to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Samuel. Agreed totally. Elias, your turn.
Yes, thank you so much. The questions is for Professor Meng. Direct question: what the future, in your point of view, the welfare state in China? China building a welfare state in the same terms of Western European countries after Second World War, or not? What the future of wealth system, education system? I want to know about that, because this is the great concern and between the China, the sinologists in Western. And the other question is more than a question, is abstraction. For example, the Western countries should be assumed that we live in a civilizational crisis. The Western countries, the Western civilization is in a deep crisis. And maybe China, in my point of view, is the last frontier between the reason and barbarism. I don't know if you agree with this, it's my point, but we live in a very deep civilizational crisis in Western countries. And China, in my point of view, is the last frontier between reason and barbarism. The most richest country of the world, United States, living there 200,000. Half of population is a fanatic, is a Christian fanatic, is don't want vacuum. It's a crazy, yeah? And China, in my point of view, the last frontier between reason and barbarism. The question is, in comparative economic systems, you think that the way the Chinese government and people react to COVID-19 was the first great demonstration after end of Soviet Union of the superiority of socialism in relation to capitalism? For example, similar when the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik project. Do you think about in these terms or not? In my point of view, yes, China, the way of Chinese government and people won the COVID-19 was the first great demonstration of superiority of socialism relation for capitalism. I want to know what you think about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elliot. I think before we round up this session, I wanted to ask a question to Gabriel as well, because in the presentation I saw that he cited Kaukovsky, the agrarian question is mainly about the proletarianization of the peasantry in the West. That is how the capitalism kind of begins, or at the beginning of it. Now China is doing, as we know, the extreme poverty eradication program, and is successful. It claims to be successful. And one of the main characteristics of it is that it is actually going into very remote places where the villagers almost had no connection to the market or to all these all the things that we see in the urban city. So it is the major project to bring these people to kind of urbanization, even though it is still within in the villages, but it is much modernized. And they will be becoming workers in some of the collectives or in the factories that are being built, expanded into the interior area. So do you think this is also a process of proletarianization of these peasants or people living in very remote places who had no connection to the market before? Or do you think this is a new thing that we are seeing? Is it part of the new projectment economy? Or would you still see it as maybe similar to proletarianization as what happened in the West hundreds of years ago? So that's my question. Before we go to the speakers, just one more round. Anyone have any questions? Otto, I don't see you. Do you raise your hand or not? No? Okay, fine. So we have 15 minutes left. So I will give it to Gaofeng, and then we'll go over to Gabriel to close this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Samuel and Elias. Thanks for very good question. Let me first answer Samuel's question. I think you have noticed that the differences even in Europe, for example, East Europe and West Europe or Central Europe, and how about they accept Chinese kind of a lesson, I would say lesson, and in that sense, that shows some big differences. I think that's true, and absolutely, I would say, this is, I also feel that absolutely is some kind of good thing, because, that's show learning fast or learning slow. So that's my, my response. I think that's one. And the second one is you talk about the main reason about it's a cultural issue between the performance of China and also the West. I think, to be fair, to be fair, I think this time at least all the whole world show much better than previous pandemic. Have you seen the good result, vaccine and also reducing death rates, and also like follow along these schemes and support, relief, whatever. So I think my whole and view is positive. So the world has learned a lot, very, very positive. We learn and huge, than we are in the ordinary time. So that's I quite positive for the futures of the world. I think I want to be frank and also seriously say, because there's one knowledge issue, pattern issue. China learning its disaster consequences for government not transparency in SOAS, for government cheating, for even central government and officials, and they learn the SOAS 2003. So Dr. Zhong Nan, and the first question is government should be open, honest, because you want and avoid that the panic. But if you don't give the real information, that will be on the contrary. So Dr. Zhong Nan has said this: the real information is like real medicine. So I think, but we learn the right thing. 2003 SARS, South Korea learned the most, but and UK, USA learn what? Flu's death rate is quite slow. So that's herd immunity that can be manageable. Use the vaccine. So I would say this time China just lucky. We have one can be trusted doctor. Unfortunately, he's trusted by his people and by his government. China is just lucky. So I think still China should learn from the West, whatever other, Latin America, and I think still it's learning from each other will be a much better future. So I'm not, pessimistic of other areas. So I would say we are just lucky. We did SARS, we have the experience. You haven't. So I think that's one knowledge issue. Yeah, thanks, Samuel. That's my question. Yeah, that's my answer to, to your questions. Yeah, thanks. Let me briefly and answer Samuel's, Ilias, question. One thing is there any welfare measures in China? I would definitely tell you and say that's positive. In the past 10 years, China has improved a lot. That's from my mother's, a story, from other my neighbors' story. So I think China is learning from the best thing in the UK. I think that's the national health system. China is far from that, but we are learning. So I guess Chinese welfare states, especially health, and are improving. One reason is this: whatever you're rich or poor, you are privileged or objective. What you are prince or you are beggar, you all have to can be affected. So in China, that means the needs are very good public infrastructure. That means they should and embrace more and more, rather than the USA, that kind of model. Some of the rich people can be abused their medical care, and some people can't even enjoy the basic, like they even have the no money for the to check some disease. So I think that's my first question. I think the second question is they say, is any relationship between Chinese performance and its socialist legacy? I think definitely. In China, scholars talk about 3 reasons for the failure of the West. They say 3. One is capitalism, because you put the money over other interests. For example, if you have a flat industry, you don't want to close your border. Yeah. If you have the hospitality industry, pub is very powerful in the West. You don't want to close the hotel pub. So your policy is hijacked by economic powerful interest group. So that's one. I think in China, at least, they concern about economy, because in Wuhan, there's more than how many international companies there, but they know if there's no good environment, they can't pursue their business as normal. So you can see a lot of foreign business donate money or do what they like, because they know if they want to earn money, like Shenzhen, in Shenzhen, they must reason that the collective public infrastructure, like for example, high speed, for example, good public transportation, those things is not provided by private company. But if private company wants to make money, they need to use young people. Young people can't have a car. They have to take the subway, take the high speed, whatever, for work. So that's provided by the public. So I asked one expert, I say, do you make profits for your high speed in China? They say just one, from Beijing to Shanghai. Others not make profit. We even has to be lose the money, but say that doesn't matter because that's the public goods. So that's their answer. I think that's and absolutely. Another thing is individualism. If you push that's the extreme individualism to one extreme, there's no God. Because in the Bible also says we should separate the goat and the sheep. That means we should separate patients from the health people. So in the UK, in the past, the church do a lot of things. Separate, build the hospital and also a village, like lock down themselves. That in the past, they have to wait and know that the help from outside, but they sacrifice. So I think this extreme individualism, no God, no state. I want to do what I do. Please, governor, don't tell me, let me, cover my mouth. I don't want to face masks. Yeah, I am, free. So no God, no government, and no family. And in China, look, several generations live in the same roof. Do you want to infect your own, grandma or grandpa? So I think, there's structural differences, but at least in China, they think at least several things are true. Their families, their parents, their older, and whatever. So in China, I guess still that's also the case. I think in the West, extremely individualism. That's one issue.
Thank you, Gaofeng. Sorry,
oh, yeah.
I need
finished
to
my answer.
come to Gabriel now. He has
thanks.
5 minutes to respond.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you short, Gabriel.
Thank you.
Well, I do think the programs of eradication of poverty is a kind of elimination of the archaic forms of agriculture, like rural subsistence agriculture. This is a very old, I think one of the oldest modes of production the humanity have ever seen. And this is here in Brazil we have it also, and definitely we should consult empirical data, but I think that is a passage to a new level of civilization because, well, they probably go in collectives or they go to household economy, and the land in China is public. You pay for the use, you have the property of the use, but the lands of the state, and this is something unheard in human story up to now. I do think that it hints. I want to make a categorical affirmation, but it hints it's a passage to a new level in the economy, not the simple privatization of agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Look forward to reading your paper. And I think we have 3 excellent presentations today. Thank you again to all the presenters. I think we had a very good session and lots of high quality discussion as well. I hope we will keep in touch and maybe share our thoughts later on as we go further with our own research. Thank you again. So we will have about 15 minutes break before we go to the next session. The next session is China's going out theory and practice, and we will be coming back at 4 p.m. British summer time, so you can take a break now and then we will see you later. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.